Imagine you're cruising down the highway, traffic is moving at 70, and your Tesla suddenly decides to go 85. You try to slow it down using the scroll wheel. Nothing happens. The only way to regain control is to completely disengage full self-driving and take over manually. This isn't a hypothetical scenario. It's happening right now to thousands of Tesla owners running FSD version 14. October 2025. Tesla begins rolling out FSD version 14 to hardware for vehicles. The update has been hyped for months as the biggest leap since version 12. Elon Musk calls it sentient. Early access testers post videos claiming the car drives more naturally than ever before. Then the wider rollout happens, and the complaints start flooding in. Owners report their cars speeding excessively, cutting off other vehicles, making aggressive lane changes without warning, and in some cases, behaving so unpredictably that people are disabling FSD entirely despite paying up to $15,000 for the feature. Here's what actually changed in FSD version 14, why owners are genuinely concerned, and what this means if you own a Tesla or are thinking about buying one. Let's start with the biggest complaint that's dominating owner forums right now: speed control. Previous versions of FSD let you set a maximum speed offset. You could tell the car never exceed 5 miles per hour over the speed limit or stay exactly at the speed limit. The car would respect that boundary. You had control. FSD version 14 removes that feature entirely. Instead, Tesla introduced 5 driving profiles called Sloth, Chill, Standard, Hurry, and Mad Max. Each profile determines how aggressively the car drives, including speed. You pick a profile. The car decides the actual speed based on traffic, speed limits, and road conditions. Sounds reasonable in theory. In practice, owners are discovering they've lost granular control over something fundamental: how fast their car goes. Here's what owners are reporting across forums and social media. One owner in Texas writes, "Standard profile routinely exceeds the speed limit by 10 to 15 miles per hour on highways. I'm getting passed by everyone in chill mode. Hurry mode feels dangerous. There's no middle ground anymore." Another owner in Montreal, "I used to drive with FSD on my entire commute. Now I can only use it for 20% of the trip because I can't control the speed. It either crawls below the limit in Sloth or races ahead in Standard. Nothing matches how I actually want to drive." A Cybertruck owner, "My truck won't hold the speed I set. I accelerate to 7 over using the pedal, release, and it immediately slows back to 2 or 3 over. I have to do this 20 times per trip. If I switch to hurry, it insists on 15 over, which I don't want." The frustration isn't just about preference, it's about safety and legality. Owners who live in areas with strict speed enforcement are getting speeding tickets because their Tesla won't respect their chosen speed. Others feel unsafe because the car is driving faster than they're comfortable with in certain conditions like rain or heavy traffic. The financial impact is real. Traffic tickets from FSD speeding can range from $150 to $500 depending on the jurisdiction. Some owners report receiving multiple tickets in a single month because they initially trusted the system to make appropriate speed choices. Insurance rates increase after speeding violations. The cost of FSD itself plus the tickets plus increased insurance premiums adds up quickly. Beyond money, there's the psychological toll. Previous FSD versions let you set boundaries and relax within them. You knew the car wouldn't exceed your chosen limit, so you could supervise without constant anxiety about speed. Version 14 requires constant vigilance. You're watching the speedometer as much as the road, ready to disengage if the car starts speeding excessively. Tesla's apparent reasoning is that full autonomy requires the car to make all decisions, including speed. Human input creates inconsistency that prevents the AI from learning optimal behavior. But owners didn't buy FSD expecting to surrender that much control. They expected assistance that enhanced their driving, not replacement that demands they accept decisions they disagree with. Now let's talk about Mad Max mode specifically. This has become the most controversial feature in FSD version 14. Mad Max is the most aggressive driving profile. Tesla describes it as having higher speeds and more frequent lane changes than hurry. What they don't mention in the official release notes is that Mad Max routinely exceeds speed limits by massive margins. Independent testing from owner groups shows Mad Max going 20 to 30 miles per hour over the limit on highways, 70 in a 55 zone, 85 in a 65 zone. This isn't occasional, it's patterned behavior. One viral video shows a Tesla in Mad Max mode going 80 miles per hour on a highway shoulder to pass slow-moving traffic, technically successful, no collision, but absolutely reckless by any reasonable standard. The existence of Mad Max mode raises serious regulatory questions. NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, is currently investigating whether Tesla should be allowed to offer a driving mode that systematically breaks traffic laws. Several states are considering restrictions. The counter-argument from Tesla enthusiasts is that human drivers routinely speed, so why shouldn't FSD? The difference is liability. If a human driver gets a ticket, they pay it. If a human causes an accident while speeding, they're liable. With FSD, the legal responsibility remains murky. Most concerning is that some owners report Mad Max making dangerous overtaking maneuvers, passing on shoulders, squeezing into gaps that are technically sufficient but socially aggressive, cutting off other drivers in ways that work but cause panic. One owner describes Mad Max as feeling like, "My ex is chasing me." The car is competent but terrifying. You arrive at your destination safely but stressed. Here's the deeper problem that speed issues reveal: loss of predictability. Previous FSD versions had clear rules you could understand. Set max speed to 68 in a 65 zone. The car won't exceed 68. Simple, predictable. FSD version 14 uses neural networks to determine speed dynamically based on dozens of variables you can't see: traffic density, road curvature, time of day, historical data from millions of drives. The AI weighs all these factors and picks a speed. That speed might be optimal from the AI's perspective, but if you don't know why the car chose that speed, you can't predict what it'll do in the next similar situation. Predictability collapses. Multiple owners describe the same experience. The car feels confident. The driving is smooth, but you never quite know what's coming next. And that unpredictability makes supervision harder, not easier. Let's move to the second major issue owners are reporting: aggressive driving behavior. FSD version 14 makes lane changes more frequently and with less hesitation than previous versions. In theory, this improves traffic flow and reduces trip times. In practice, many owners find the behavior too aggressive for their comfort. Here's what owners describe: unexpected lane changes. The car changes lanes without user input when it detects slower traffic ahead. You didn't request the lane change. You might not agree it was necessary, but the car does it anyway, cutting off other vehicles. The car commits to lane changes into gaps that are technically safe but require the other driver to brake. This works 99% of the time, but it creates situations where other drivers honk, flash lights, or make aggressive gestures. One owner in Austin reports his Tesla attempted an unprotected left turn across 3 lanes of oncoming traffic during rush hour. The car committed to the maneuver. He panicked and grabbed the wheel. The car resisted his input for approximately 2 seconds before yielding control. He completed the turn safely, but spent the rest of the drive shaking. That last detail is crucial. The car resisted his input. FSD version 14 includes a feature where the system briefly delays responding to driver interventions. Tesla's explanation is that people sometimes accidentally bump the wheel or tap the brake unintentionally, causing unnecessary disengagements. The system now waits 1 to 3 seconds to determine if the input is deliberate or accidental. This makes sense from an engineering perspective. False disengagements interrupt the AI's learning and create jerky driving experiences. But from a driver's perspective, fighting your own car for control is terrifying, even if it's only 2 seconds, even if the system eventually yields. In those 2 seconds, you're not sure if the car will respond to your input or continue with its planned action. Multiple owners report this specific scenario. They see a situation they perceive as dangerous. They grab the wheel to intervene. The car pushes back. They push harder. The car finally yields. Disaster is avoided, but the experience leaves them questioning whether to use FSD again. Now let's talk about an issue that improved significantly but still causes problems: brake stabbing. Early versions of FSD 14.1 had a serious problem with sudden, unexpected hard braking. Owners called it brake stabbing. The car would be cruising normally, then suddenly slam the brakes for no visible reason. No obstacle, no traffic conflict, just a momentary decision by the AI that braking was necessary. This happened frequently enough that Tesla rushed out FSD 14.1.1 just days after 14.1 was released. The update partially addressed the problem. By version 14.2, brake stabbing was largely eliminated in highway driving. Most owners report smooth, confident braking and acceleration on open roads, but the problem persists in complex urban environments and parking structures. Multiple owners report their cars getting confused in parking garages. The vehicle might stop suddenly when approaching ticket booths, or brake hard when other cars are maneuvering nearby, or get stuck in loops, unable to decide on a path forward. One owner writes, FSD-14 is superhuman on the highway. At 65 miles per hour, it predicts traffic better than I can, but at 5 miles per hour in a parking garage, it looks like a confused teenager. This creates a safety paradox. The system is safer than humans in high-speed scenarios where consequences are severe, but it struggles in low-speed scenarios where humans easily navigate by instinct and spatial awareness. Here's another issue that's causing frustration: lane change hesitation. Some owners report the opposite problem from aggressive lane changes. Their cars can't commit to lane changes at all. The pattern looks like this: the car signals to change lanes, begins moving toward the gap, then aborts the maneuver, signal turns off, then immediately signals again, begins moving, aborts again. This cycle repeats multiple times. One owner posted a video showing his Tesla's turn signal flashing on and off for 30 seconds while the car repeatedly started and stopped a lane change attempt. Eventually, he had to manually complete the maneuver. This happens when the neural network can't decide if the gap is sufficient. The AI sees the space, calculates it's technically adequate, begins the move, then recalculates based on approaching vehicle speed, determines it's too risky, aborts, then recalculates again based on updated data. The result is indecisive behavior that creates exactly the confusion and unpredictability the system is supposed to eliminate. Now let's address something Tesla doesn't talk about much: Hardware 3 versus Hardware 4. FSD version 14 is optimized for Hardware 4 vehicles. These are primarily 2024 and later Teslas with the latest computer hardware. Hardware 3 vehicles, which include most Teslas sold from 2019 to mid-2023, are still running FSD version 12.6. Tesla has promised a FSD 14 Lite version for Hardware 3 vehicles sometime in Q2 of 2026. This creates a two-tier system. Owners who paid the same price for FSD are getting dramatically different experiences based solely on when they bought their car. Some Hardware 3 owners report feeling abandoned. They paid up to $15,000 for a feature that's no longer being actively developed for their vehicle. Tesla's response is that Hardware 3 doesn't have sufficient computing power to run version 14's neural networks. That may be technically true, but it doesn't change the fact that customers paid for full self-driving with the expectation of ongoing improvements and are now watching newer vehicles get capabilities their cars will never have. The situation gets worse when you consider resale value. A 2022 Tesla with FSD is worth significantly less than a 2024 Tesla with FSD, even if both owners paid the same price for the feature initially. The older car is stuck on outdated software that Tesla has essentially abandoned. Buyers know this. They discount Hardware 3 vehicles accordingly. Tesla's promise of FSD 14 Lite doesn't inspire confidence. Lite suggests compromised functionality. Owners paid full price. They expected full functionality. Getting a watered-down version months or years late feels like a bait and switch, even if Tesla's technical constraints are legitimate. Let's talk about the attention monitoring controversy. FSD version 14.2 introduced variable attention monitoring sensitivity. The system adjusts how strictly it monitors the driver based on camera visibility and perceived supervision behavior. Some owners report the system became far more sensitive after the update. One Model S owner writes, "Attention monitoring sensitivity increased 50-fold. I'm constantly applying slight force to the yoke to prove I'm paying attention. It's exhausting." Others report the opposite. Their monitoring sensitivity decreased, allowing more relaxed supervision. The inconsistency suggests the system is trying to personalize based on individual driver behavior, but hasn't calibrated properly for everyone. The bigger concern is what this reveals about Tesla's approach. Variable monitoring sensitivity implies the system is making real-time judgments about whether you're adequately supervising, but you have no visibility into those judgments. You don't know when the threshold changes or why. This creates yet another layer of unpredictability. The car isn't just making driving decisions you don't fully understand. It's also making supervision decisions you don't fully understand. Here's what's most interesting about all these complaints. The capability is real. Multiple independent observers, including NVIDIA's director of AI and robotics, have praised FSD version 14. Jim Fan wrote on X, "It's perhaps the first time I experience an AI that passes the physical Turing test. After a long day at work, you press a button, lay back, and couldn't tell if a neural net or a human drove you home. Longtime FSD testers report version 14 handles scenarios that broke previous versions: unprotected left turns in heavy traffic, complex multi-lane roundabouts, construction zones with confusing signage. The AI is genuinely more capable. So why are owners panicking? Because capability and comfort aren't the same thing. A system can be objectively better at driving while simultaneously feeling worse to supervise. Previous FSD versions made frequent small mistakes that required intervention. Version 14 makes fewer total mistakes, but occasionally makes bigger ones. You intervene less often, but when you do intervene, it's because the car is doing something that genuinely concerns you. That psychological shift matters. Supervising a system that needs frequent minor corrections feels safer than supervising a system that usually works perfectly but occasionally attempts something questionable. Let's reality check the safety data we actually have. Tesla doesn't publish version-specific safety statistics. Their quarterly safety reports combine FSD miles with regular autopilot miles with non-assisted driving. You cannot isolate whether version 14 is safer or more dangerous than version 12. Crowdsourced data from owner groups shows version 14 requires driver intervention approximately 60% less often than version 12. That sounds positive. Fewer interventions should mean better performance. But when researchers break down intervention severity, the picture changes. Version 12 had frequent low-severity interventions. The car would brake unnecessarily at a shadow, and you'd tap the accelerator. Annoying, but not dangerous. Version 14 has fewer total interventions, but higher severity when they occur. You're intervening because the car is doing something that requires immediate correction, not just something mildly annoying. Independent analysis from Electrek suggests FSD version 14.1 averages about 732 miles between critical disengagements. That's below expectations for a system Tesla claims is approaching unsupervised operation. For context, true level 4 autonomy probably requires 10,000 miles between critical disengagements minimum. Version 14 is nowhere close to that threshold. Here's the regulatory situation that's developing. NHTSA is investigating Tesla over multiple FSD-related complaints. Mad Max mode specifically is under scrutiny for systematically exceeding speed limits. European regulators are even more aggressive. Germany has already forced Tesla to stop using full self-driving branding in marketing, requiring clearer disclaimers that constant driver supervision is mandatory. The EU is drafting regulations that would require explainability for any AI system that can override driver input. If those regulations pass, Tesla would need to fundamentally redesign how FSD communicates its decision-making to users. France is considering restrictions. The UK is developing new safety standards specifically targeting autonomous vehicle software updates. Multiple countries are watching Tesla's approach to determine how strictly they need to regulate consumer autonomous driving systems. If a high-profile accident occurs involving FSD version 14, especially one where Mad Max mode was active or where the car resisted driver intervention, regulatory backlash could be severe. We're talking forced software downgrades, mandatory opt-in consent for updates, or even temporary suspension of FSD features in certain markets. The legal precedent being established matters beyond Tesla. How regulators handle FSD version 14 will shape rules for every autonomous vehicle company. If Tesla gets away with aggressive, unpredictable AI making decisions humans can't override, other companies will follow. If regulators crack down hard, it could slow autonomous vehicle development across the industry. China is watching particularly closely. They've already restricted Tesla's data collection and FSD testing in certain areas. If version 14 causes problems in Western markets, China could use that as justification for even tighter restrictions on foreign autonomous vehicle technology. Insurance companies are also reconsidering how to handle FSD. Some insurers are raising rates for vehicles with FSD enabled, arguing the technology introduces new risk categories they haven't fully assessed. Others are offering discounts based on Tesla's claim that FSD is safer than human drivers. But if version 14 shows increased accident rates, those discounts will disappear quickly and premiums could spike significantly. So what should you actually do if you own a Tesla Tesla with FSD. First, understand what version 14 actually is. This is not incremental improvement, it's a fundamental architecture change that alters how the car makes decisions. The behavior is different enough that you need to relearn your car's patterns. Second, don't use it if you're not prepared for unpredictability. If you need to know what your car will do next in order to feel comfortable supervising, stick with version 12 or disable FSD entirely. Version 14 prioritizes capability over predictability. Third, learn the speed profiles by actually testing them on routes standard might be perfect for your highway commute, but too aggressive for residential streets. Hurry might work for open highways but feel reckless in traffic. You need to experiment to find what matches your risk tolerance. Fourth, don't trust it more than you should. The system handles routine situations impressively, but edge cases are where failures happen. Construction zones, pedestrians behaving unpredictably, weather-reducing visibility. These are exactly the situations where you need maximum alertness, not relaxed supervision. Fifth, consider whether the subscription makes more sense than the upfront purchase. At $99 monthly, you can try version 14 for a month. If the behavior makes you uncomfortable, cancel. You're only out $100 instead of $12,000. If you're thinking about buying a Tesla specifically for FSD, here's the calculation you need to make. You're paying $8,000 to $15,000 for a level 2 assistance system that requires constant supervision, behaves unpredictably, and may not work on your vehicle if you have hardware 3. The legal responsibility for everything the car does remains entirely yours. What you're getting is genuinely impressive technology that handles highway driving very well, improves constantly through over-the-air updates, and will eventually become more capable. But eventually might mean years, not months. Competitors are closing the gap. Mercedes has certified level 3 autonomy on highways in certain states. GM's Super Cruise handles highways with less aggressive behavior. Both systems cost less than Tesla's FSD. The question isn't whether FSD version 14 is technically impressive, it clearly is. The question is whether impressive technology that makes you anxious is worth $12,000. Here's what's coming that you should watch. First, version 14.3. Tesla is currently testing this internally. If it addresses the speed control and aggressive driving complaints, owner sentiment will shift quickly. If it doubles down on the current approach, expect more cancellations and negative press. Second, yes, the FSD 14 Lite release for hardware 3 vehicles. If Tesla delivers a version that works well on older hardware, that repairs some of the trust damage. If it's significantly compromised or arrives late, hardware 3 owners will feel justified in their frustration. Third, regulatory decisions in Europe. If the Netherlands approves FSD for public roads, it validates Tesla's approach and opens the entire Eurozone market. If regulators reject it, that signals serious safety concerns that could affect US deployment. Fourth, long-term safety data. 6 months from now, researchers will have enough miles to determine if version 14 is statistically safer than version 12. If accident rates are lower, the panic was overblown. If they're higher or unchanged, Tesla has a major problem. Fifth, liability cases. When the first lawsuit over an FSD version 14 accident reaches court, how judges rule on questions of responsibility will set precedent for the entire autonomous driving industry. So should you panic about FSD version 14? Panic is the wrong response, but paying attention is absolutely justified. This update represents Tesla pushing harder and faster toward autonomy than any other consumer vehicle manufacturer. They're deploying technology to millions of vehicles that most competitors only test in controlled environments with professional safety drivers. That aggressive approach creates genuine capability. It also creates genuine risk. Version 14 is more capable than version 12 in most scenarios. It's also less predictable, more aggressive, and harder to supervise effectively. The owners panicking aren't irrational. They're responding to a product that changed fundamentally without adequate warning. They paid for a feature with certain characteristics and received an update that altered those characteristics without their explicit consent. Whether version 14 is ultimately better or worse than version 12 isn't just about statistics. It's about whether owners trust the system enough to use it. And right now, thousands of owners are answering that question by disabling FSD entirely. This situation reveals something critical about the path to full autonomy. The journey from 90% capable to 99% capable involves changes that make the technology less comfortable to use, even as it becomes objectively better. The final percentage points of capability requires surrendering control in ways most people aren't psychologically prepared for. Tesla is essentially asking customers to be beta testers for technology that operates in the uncanny valley of autonomy, too capable to feel like simple assistants, not capable enough to trust completely. That's an uncomfortable position that requires a specific personality type willing to accept significant uncertainty in exchange for cutting-edge technology. The question Tesla faces is whether enough customers fit that personality type to sustain FSD development. If too many people disable the feature or cancel subscriptions, Tesla loses the real-world driving data that makes improvement possible. Without that data, development stalls. The whole approach depends on customers remaining engaged despite discomfort. Are you running FSD version 14? What's your experience been? Drop your honest take in the comments. And if you want tech coverage that uses real data instead of hype, subscribe. This is what we do.